This is a 30 years old man who is suffering from excessive sweating of the palms and soles. Note the sweat on his palms. He is doing a clerical job, and whenever he starts writing on a paper, the paper becomes wet. This ailment also interferes with all fine jobs, particularly in jobs like electronics where a dry working hand is a must. It also makes social contacts difficult as shake hands become embarrassing. These patients may also have excessive sweating of the soles and the face. Now let us inspect the feet of this patient. The soles show skin lesions due to fungal infection secondary to the dampness of the soles. You can also see intertrigo, that is interdigital teniasis between the 4th and 5th toes. The patient also complains of bad smell to the feet whenever he uses shoes. This condition is called hyperhidrosis or excessive sweating. Some relief may be obtained by soaking the palms and soles in warm water with salt or 10% formalin for 5 minutes every day, then dry thoroughly, apply a moisturizing cream and auxiliary deodorant containing aluminum chlorohydrate. Instruct the patient to use open footwear or canvas shoes and cotton socks, and check the feet regularly for fungal infection. In severe cases like the one we are seeing now, interfering with the daily work, a T2-T3 sympathectomy bilaterally or at least on the right side may be considered. This was hyperhidrosis or excessive sweating. This patient has presented with intolerance to chilies. He gets burning sensation in the mouth whenever he eats chilies. On inspecting the oral cavity, you can see the white color of the palate mucosa. Compare the color of the palate with the normal pink color of the tongue. This is a case of oral submucous fibrosis. The patient has a habit of eating gutka and betel nut. This has resulted in progressive development of fibrous bands beneath the oral mucosa and epithelial atrophy. It mainly affects the cheek and the palate and may also affect the tongue. This is an early case and the patient can open his mouth fully. Now we shall see another patient, and you will note that this patient can open his mouth only partially. As the submucous fibrosis progresses, particularly in the mucosa of the cheek and behind the molars, the fibrous bands progressively contract and the mouth opening becomes severely limited. Now note the white color of the mucosa over the palate, anterior pillar, retromolar space and the cheek. The submucous fibrosis has also extended onto the tongue. The tongue mucosa also shows the typical white color. You must remember that this is a precancerous condition and you must persuade the patient to stop eating all irritants, that is betel nut, tobacco, pan, gutka and chilies. Early lesions are treated by intralesional injections of steroids and hyaluronidase. The advanced lesions with restricted jaw opening are treated with laser incisions or surgical excision with buccal pad grafting. This was oral submucous fibrosis. Observe the middle finger of this lady as she first clenches her fist and then releases it. The middle finger cannot be extended, and then with some excess effort it extends with a snap. Sometimes a little assistance may be needed from the other hand. But note how the extension occurs with a jerk, very much like the trigger of a gun which has a resistance till the bullet is fired. This condition is termed as trigger finger. This lady has a problem in kneading the dough when her finger gets locked. It results from narrowing of the sheath of the flexor tendon of the finger. The tendon just distal to the constriction becomes swollen like a nodule. The flexor muscles, being powerful, can pull it across the constriction with ease. But the extensors, being weak, their force is insufficient and the extension is blocked. With continued efforts or with some assistance, the swollen tendon gets forced through the constricted sheath, and then the finger extends quickly, very much like the action of a carom player. This condition most commonly affects middle or ring fingers in middle-aged female patients. Now palpate over the head of the metacarpal. A nodular thickening may be palpable in the flexor tendon at the site of narrowing. An early case may be cured by local hydrocortisone injection. Other cases will need surgical slitting of the fibrous sheath to relieve the constriction. This was a trigger finger. This patient is a lesson in first aid treatment. He presented with history of severe bleeding from a swelling on the medial aspect of the right leg. The bleeding was controlled with great difficulty with a pressure bandage, and then he was brought to the hospital. You can see here a varicosity which is compressible with ulceration on its surface. This is probably a blowout over an incompetent below knee perforator. Now watch how the swelling becomes tense when the leg is kept down, and then the varicosity has ruptured and the blood flows out in a jet. A ruptured varicose vein bleeds heavily, but it can be controlled with ease. Let the patient lie down and elevate the leg fully. Now the bleeding has immediately reduced to a trickle, and with a few seconds of pressure it will stop. Now give a tight compression bandage and keep the patient in bed till skin unites. Or holding the leg raised, take a figure of 8 stitch to close the defect and then give a tight compression bandage. The point to remember is, whenever there is a venous bleeding in the leg, make the patient lie down, elevate the leg and apply pressure. If you try to control it by pressure or suture when the leg is dependent or horizontal, a lot of blood will flow out unnecessarily. Observe the left eyeball of this patient as I ask her to look to the left, right, up and down. When the patient looks to her left, the left eye fails to turn laterally or outwards. All other movements of the left eye are normal. At rest, there is a slight convergent squint of the left eye. All this means that the lateral rectus of the left eye is paralyzed. This is a case of left sixth cranial nerve palsy. The only complaint the patient has is diplopia or double vision on looking to the left. The clinical importance of the sixth nerve or abducens palsy is that it is the commonest nerve affected whenever there is raised intracranial tension, basal meningitis, cavernous sinus thrombosis or intracranial tumors. This is because of its long intracranial course. So sixth nerve palsy should always be investigated by doing a CT or MRI scan of the brain. This young adult male complains of a papular rash over his face, neck, chest and back. This is the typical area distribution of acne vulgaris or the common acne, a very common skin lesion seen in teenagers, more common in males with oily skin. These individual lesions of acne are called comedones. They are produced by obstruction of the pilosebaceous passage, which is the common outlet for the hair, sebaceous glands, and apocrine sweat glands. The obstruction results in development of a non-inflammatory papular lesion. Papule is a small circumscribed solid elevation of skin up to 5 mm in size. Larger than that is termed as a nodule. The papule may get infected to form tiny pustules, or sometimes it may enlarge to form nodules and cysts. To study the distribution of acne, we shall see another case. The acne comedones occur most commonly over the face. In more severe cases, they are seen over the upper chest and upper back. Coming back to our first case, they are seen extensively over the chest and also the neck. They are also seen over the entire back. Now let us see the acne comedones in close-up. In this patient, some comedones show a tiny pit on the surface, which is often black in color. These are called open comedones or blackheads. Some comedones are covered by smooth skin. These are called closed comedones or whiteheads. The next patient shows some large acne which have developed into cystic lesions. These are cysts containing hard deposits of sebum. One of them below the right eye is infected and shows inflammation, redness and edema. This patient shows some acne which are separating in the center. These are acne with pustules. The pustules heal with scarring. Note some papules, some pustules and many scars in acne vulgaris. This young male has extensive and large separating acne covered with scabs. They are closely located with acute inflammation. Some burst on the surface while some spread under the skin forming sinus tracts. These are termed as suppurating acne or acne conglobata. They heal with antibiotic treatment but leave disfiguring scars. Coming to the treatment, the patient should be advised to wash the face with gentle soap 4 to 5 times in the day. If comedones are formed, apply tretinoin ointment like Retino A at night on alternate days. For superficial papules, apply benzoyl peroxide ointment once daily in the morning. If the comedones are infected, apply topical antibiotics like erythromycin twice daily and give doxycycline 100 mg daily for 3 to 4 weeks. Note the milky white patch on the right margin of the tongue. It is thick, opaque white and has a warty surface. This is leukoplakia of the tongue, also termed as chronic superficial glossitis. Leukoplakia is a disorder of hyperkeratosis where the epithelial cells proliferate excessively, get cornified and form opaque white patches. As the patches become thicker, cracks, fissures and warty areas develop. Over a period of time, more than 30% of the leukoplakias develop carcinoma, which if you diagnose and treat in time are 100% preventable. Now we will see an early case of leukoplakia or stage 1 chronic superficial glossitis. In this patient, there is a thin milky whitish film over the left as well as the right surface of the tongue. This is an early case where epithelial cornification has just started. Chewing or smoking tobacco is the commonest etiological factor for leukoplakia in our country. In the next patient, we can see two patches of thick white color over the tongue. They are soft with no underlying induration. This is stage 2 chronic superficial glossitis or well-developed leukoplakia. In the next case, we can see opaque white patch of leukoplakia in the central part of the tongue. On closer inspection, we can see some cracks and deep fissures. Malignant changes very often start in these fissures within the leukoplakia. So this lesion must be excised, or if not excised, then a regular monthly follow-up for induration and growth is very essential. Now we will come back to the first case. Here there is so much hypertrophy and keratinization of the epithelial cells that the surface looks warty. And anteriorly, there is desquamation. We see smooth red and shiny surface where the keratinized white layer is shed off. This is stage 3 leukoplakia, which is definitely a precancerous stage. An immediate biopsy to rule out carcinoma is indicated. The fourth stage of chronic superficial glossitis or leukoplakia is clinically detectable carcinoma. In this next patient, observe the multiple white leukoplakic patches over the tongue. Now observe the patch over the right tongue margin. There is a raised growth which definitely looks suspicious of malignancy. On palpation, the growth and the base is indurated. Note also the thickening of the tongue around it. This is stage 4 chronic superficial glossitis or carcinoma developed in a leukoplakic patch. Coming to treatment, small areas of leukoplakia like the one we see on the left tongue margin should be excised. If the area is too large for excision, as the one you see on the right, it should be biopsied to confirm that there is no malignancy. Then all irritants like tobacco, sharp teeth, spices should be withdrawn. And follow up every month to look for malignant change. Any swelling, warty surface or induration should be immediately biopsied and treated. This young lady has presented with a painless swelling over the right forehead, which at first glance from a distance looks like a sebaceous cyst. But on palpation, the skin is freely mobile over the swelling and the swelling is bony hard. It is arising from the bone and is fixed to the bone. This may be an osteoma or a secondary in the skull from malignancy like thyroid. X-ray of the skull shows a characteristic, dense, well-circumscribed radio-opaque shadow, typical of compact osteoma. The tumor does not contain cancellous bone, only compact bone, hence the name compact osteoma. It is very dense and casts an ivory-like shadow. If this benign tumor arises on the inner surface of the skull, it may give rise to focal epilepsy. Otherwise, it is asymptomatic. This is compact osteoma or ivory osteoma.